Most people think desire appears suddenly. One moment nothing is happening, and the next moment someone is emotionally invested. But the chapters in this section suggest something very different. Desire is not usually spontaneous. It is built, quietly, gradually, often below the surface. Before people even understand what they are feeling, certain emotional conditions have already been created. The first of those conditions is need. A person who feels fully satisfied is difficult to move. But a person who feels restless, incomplete, overlooked, or dissatisfied is much more likely to respond strongly to someone who seems to offer relief. This is why the chapter on creating need is so central. It argues that attraction becomes stronger when people become more aware of what is missing in their lives. Not always in a dramatic way. Sometimes it is subtle, a mood, a dissatisfaction they cannot fully explain, a sense that their life has become predictable, emotionally flat, or unfulfilling. Once that feeling is awake, the next step becomes much more powerful. That next step is insinuation. Instead of saying everything directly, the idea is to let suggestions work in the background. Hints, glances, slightly ambiguous words, comments that feel innocent on the surface but carry another meaning underneath. This works because direct statements trigger analysis. But suggestion often slips past resistance. People do not always fight what they barely notice. In many cases, the strongest ideas are the ones that seem to form inside their own mind. This is why insinuation feels so powerful. It is not forceful. It does not openly demand belief. It simply plants a possibility. And once that possibility takes root, the person begins to participate in the process themselves. They start imagining, interpreting, wondering, filling in the gaps with their own thoughts. That is a key idea here. The more someone feels they arrived at a feeling on their own, the more natural and convincing that feeling becomes. But there is another layer to this process. It is not enough to make someone feel desire. You also have to make them feel understood. That is where entering their spirit comes in. This chapter is really about emotional adaptation. It says that people become easier to influence when they feel deeply mirrored. When someone seems to understand their moods, their preferences, their frustrations, and their inner world, resistance drops. Why? Because people love feeling seen. They love the sense that someone gets them without effort. This does not just create comfort, it creates attachment. If someone starts to feel that you understand them better than the people already around them, your emotional value rises very quickly. You stop being just another person. You become a kind of emotional refuge, someone who fits their rhythm, someone who does not create friction, someone who seems to naturally belong in their world. And once that bond begins to form, temptation becomes the final push. Temptation is not the full promise. It is the glimpse, the possibility, the suggestion of pleasure just ahead. This chapter is not really about giving everything. It is about making someone feel that something exciting, fulfilling, or forbidden is near enough to taste, but not yet fully theirs. That gap is crucial, because desire grows strongest when fulfillment feels possible but not guaranteed. Think about how powerful that is. First, dissatisfaction is stirred. Then meaning is planted through hints instead of blunt statements. Then emotional closeness is built by adapting to the other person's inner world. And finally, temptation is introduced as a future pleasure just beyond reach. At that point, desire is no longer random. It has structure, momentum, direction. What makes this section especially interesting is that it shows how emotional movement often happens long before clear action. People can already be halfway pulled in while still telling themselves nothing serious is going on. They feel the tension but do not fully name it. They feel the anticipation but cannot explain why. And that is exactly why the process works so well. It develops under the level of ordinary logic. The deeper lesson is that people do not move only because they are told to. They move because something inside them has been awakened. A lack, a curiosity, a fantasy, a hope, a pleasure they can almost imagine touching. Once those forces are activated, the person begins to lean forward emotionally on their own. So if this section has one central message, it is this: desire is strongest when it feels self-generated. The moment a person believes the longing is coming from inside them, not from outside pressure, that longing becomes much harder to resist. And that is how desire gets built before people even realize it is already happening.